way I see existential obsessions is really there when our mind throws us questions or statements about reality that can be very distressing, often very anxiety provoking. But I think it also can have a depressive flavor. You can have a kind of anxious version of it or a more depressive version. And really, it's on all the core philosophical questions that have troubled humanity, since we turned from apes into thinking humans. So it's things like life and death, freedom, consciousness, free will, self, isolation. Your mind could be throwing you sort of questions about what happens when we die, or what is reality? Am I real? Is this a simulation? So it'll throw you those kind of intense troubling questions that everyone might think of at times. Actually, the kind of things that, like, when you sat around a campfire, people chat about this stuff and it can be quite fun. But when it's existential obsessions, it's very distressing normally, or very it can kind of dissociate you, or give you depersonalization or depressive sort of qualities. And I had a lot of it actually with my OCD in the past. I had it kind of later on in my OCD journey. It was sort of following and probably quite related to health anxiety. I kind of had them both together, and then my mind went this way into this kind of just questioning, throwing me these questions, and then wanting to ruminate and analyze, and feeling like you had to figure it out, otherwise you can't go on with life, or I've got to figure this out to keep me safe, or I've got to figure this out so I can be happy. It's sort of all of those things. This is where the ACT skills around diffusion are so helpful, to be able to kind of watch that obsession and then put down the compulsion, let go of the compulsion, and just allow the obsession to be there. Be so intense with this one. I remember when I was struggling with it, I had days and months where it was all the time. My mind would just make that link with anything, because there is impermanence everywhere, and there is reality everywhere, and there is sense of self all the time. So the triggers with this sort of theme could be there 24/7. Like, I remember a period of time where I couldn't walk around the streets and not see elderly people, and it would just trigger this panic all the time, like seeing elderly people. And it was so crazy that my mind, 6 months, a year before that, would not have made that association at all. And then suddenly, just everywhere I looked, I'd just be sat at my desk typing an email, and suddenly I'd be aware of like reality, or impermanence, or sense of self, and then it would send this wave of real tightness like this, and panic and terror. So really learning to accept and learning to watch my mind put that stuff down, and then flip the pain around. What does this fear tell us we care about? It tells us we care about having a meaningful, enjoyable life, that we have some sense that this could be our only life, depending on what your beliefs are, but that there's a sense that there is only this life now, and that's really important, and I want to be in it. It can tell us about connection. If I feel isolated and alone and like everything's meaningless, it probably means I care deeply about people, and I want to turn towards them. So that ACT principle of our values being on the flip side of our pain, I think, is so important for this one. And then the other thing with values as well for this one is that our mind wants to ruminate and analyze and figure out this stuff to get on with life. But the thing that the reason values work so well is we just choose them, and then build our goals and our behavior around them, and live them in a diffused way, and then we see if it works. So it's like flipping the order. This kind of OCD wants to figure everything out and then live life, whereas values is choose, live life, and see how it's going. So it's so useful, I found, for this kind of theme. I think present moment is a really essential skill for this, and something was so helpful, because when I struggled with this, my mind was so confused. It was like questioning everything and what to do and where to go. And in that moment, if you can come back into the present moment and just do something really simple, again, it's like that the antidote to that confusion and that analysis and that stuckness. What am I doing right now, and what do I want to do in this moment, and what would I have wanted to have done in the past? And let's just choose it, do it, live it, get my mind into it. And I think this stuff can hook on to happiness and meaning and purpose so much. So happiness is really tricky because, I love that metaphor that I think was Thoreau came up with it, which is happiness is like a butterfly. If we chase around trying to grab it, it'll get through our fingers. But if we sit there and relax, it'll come and land on us. And I think this is where present moment's so helpful, that actually if we try and figure out happiness and try and grab it and try and get to it, try and understand it with these sorts of obsessions, it'll just flitter through our fingers. But actually present moment attention we can control, even when we're highly mentally distressed. And I've had those times when you couldn't focus for 10 seconds and your mind was all over the place. But even in that moment, you can practice attentional skills. You can practice coming back to the present moment bit by bit, gradually. And then the brilliant thing is, if you focus on that present moment, then you'll start to get engaged, connected with things, and then that happiness butterfly will come and land on you again. So it's like that's such an antidote to it as well. The present moment skills, and even when it's tough, we can do some degree of coming back to the present moment. You said it's workability, so if things work for people, great. But my experience was when I was really distressed, none of that stuff would work, and it would make everything worse, because then I'd start going, why isn't this working? And what technique should I do? And what should I be doing here? And what's wrong with me that this isn't working? Or, your mind would just start to kind of analyze all of that as well, and all the choices. So to have it as simple as possible, to focus in the present moment. And I think, people get attention. People know what attention means and the value of it, because we all experience, attention being a good thing when we're focused in our work or a hobby or something like that. So I think sometimes present moment can sound a little bit too spiritual for some people who aren't that way orientated, and a little bit power of now, Eckhart Tolle sort of ideas, but really attentional skills. And, you can have task focused thinking. It can be you're engaged in something where you have to use your thinking mind. So it's not just pure, in my mind, it's not just pure mindfulness skills. If I'm playing a game of chess, I want to be using my thinking mind as I engage in it as well in the present moment. So, really just to have these attentional skills, which super tough when you're struggling with OCD, when you're deep in it, or depression or depersonalization. It's very hard to focus and to have your attention. But if we trust that it's a little bit like an injured muscle, that if we keep moving it, gradually get it back, it will get stronger again, and then it will be there. And then, it really help us with these compulsions about existential matters that really keep the whole thing going and keep the distress so high. When I was struggling with it, my mind was doing compulsions all day long. I'd be stuck in it, and so much so they were automatic. I barely noticed I was doing them, but they were just chattering away in the background through trying everything and nothing helping, which I think is often a route into ACT. You try multiple different approaches, different therapy, different practices, different self-help things. And, sometimes things along that journey work for people. And I think often with clients of mine, when they're more high functioning or their distress isn't so high, some of that stuff can work, when your thinking mind is still available, and, you can use that kind of stuff. But for me, I traveled all over the world, learning from different masters and teachers, and done loads of different therapy approaches, and different acceptance kept coming back as this, really useful principle. And then, I found the more I tried to control anxiety, intrusive thoughts, and depersonalization, depression, all of that stuff, the worse it got. So it kind of like reality just told me acceptance is the only thing that's going to help. And then when I started doing that very quickly, actually, with some exposure work, I did, it all together, with the ACT skills and exposure, very quickly, it came back down to a much more manageable level. And then I could see the pattern. Then I could see, okay, it's these difficult thoughts, and then I get stuck in these compulsions, and I get stuck, fixed on my feelings and worrying and feeling, and all of that just amps it up, keeps it high. And actually, if I step back, observe that, and then I choose things that matter, and I try to build my life around that, gosh, it feels a lot better. And there's still anxiety, and there's still, low mood at times, and difficult stuff will be there, but it's actually, it's not a problem when you're really accepting it. Actually, you know, I think of it as these two modes of mind. There's one mode of mind related to the present moment where you're really engaged, really connected, and it's easy and it's blissful and great. And then there's another mode of mind where you have some difficult stuff there, and you're unhooking from it and you're engaging in the present moment. And that's great too. And I think when you have built up the skills, both of those modes of mind are great. It doesn't matter which one you're in. Sometimes I prefer being in the difficult one because you're learning stuff, you're working skills, it's more meaningful. It shows you're doing difficult things, challenging stuff. So yeah, it's like acceptance. And, you know, acceptance is everywhere, right? Acceptance goes back to all ancient cultures, and, you know, it's all over history. It's everywhere. Every culture has, you know, some form of acceptance as a kind of psychological tool. And that's really the willingness idea is, you know, I'm willing to have this stuff in the service of values. And I think, yeah, you can't really talk about acceptance without values. You're so right.
True.